Alrighty, so I will get started here again, just to make sure that I am staying on time. So welcome to our first session, everyone. My name is Rachel. I am one of our freshman admissions advisors at UW-Milwaukee. For today's presentation, I am going to be very general. So I'm going to be talking about starting that college search process and just giving a little bit more background on college admission steps, what most colleges and kind of what we are looking for, especially at UW&M and a little bit more even into the UW system. I will leave my contact information up at the end in case anyone has any questions. Feel free to post into the chat if you want to. Audio should be available. I'm hoping to leave time at the end for any questions as well, but definitely don't hesitate to post anything to our chat box if you need to as well throughout the presentation, and I will try to answer questions as I go. Or afterwards. So that will be available. So to get started with some information, I always like to share kind of course, the planning process in general and kind of the idea of, is planning necessary? What can we start to look for throughout that college search process? Obviously, coming kind of from the NACAC background for our Admission Counseling Association, we always like to say in admissions that yes, college planning is necessary, and starting to think ahead about that through the rest of your high school career in terms of your grades and your academic rigor. That still plays the largest role in the admissions college search process as well. So in regards to that review that we have and regards to what an admissions office is looking for, typically first and foremost is of course going to be that academic rigor and a student's grades and academic GPA. I know that's with COVID-19 that has changed for many of us in a lot of ways in an admissions office. So of course, this always comes kind of with a little caveat or an asterisk of changes can always occur every single year as well with admissions offices, especially being true this year as we move ahead into fall 2021 cycle. Of course, we do always tend to see a lot of college students saying that they wish they had worked a little bit harder in high school and prepped a little bit more as well. So we do want students to keep that in mind. In a lot of ways, this doesn't mean that students should overexert themselves, but rather just making sure that they have everything that they need and to kind of just, again, think ahead timeline-wise of what you can do every single year of high school to really prep ahead. So maybe that means starting to list the schools that you're interested in, starting to list a major or program or area of study that you're interested in, and really start to build up that list, even as early as even going into freshman and sophomore year in terms of starting to think about where your interests are. Again, you don't have to have a finalized decision by any means. This is always going to be something that can be ever changing as you're going through that search process. Knowing your college options is a really good start as well. Wisconsin, we have a lot of college options here. So we do have our University of Wisconsin system that is comprised of our four-year institutions as well as our two-year branch campuses. So this is actually a consolidation effort that happened in 2018, so just a couple years ago, where all of our two-year schools became branch campuses to their respective four-year. As an example, to use UW-Milwaukee, UW-Milwaukee, we now have our branch campus locations at Waukesha and Washington County. So we do offer associate's degree programs and transfer options available for all of our students so that they can seamlessly transfer to UWM, but they also do have transfer opportunities to other UW schools. So they don't necessarily have to go to UW-Milwaukee. There are also a large number of private universities all across the state. The majority of them are going to be right within that Milwaukee area. Obviously, Marquette University tends to be one of the bigger private institution names, but locally in the Milwaukee area, we also have Mount Mary, Alverno, Cardinal Stritch, MSOE, and there's a number of others that are just right here, Carroll University in Waukesha, a number of others that are right here within the southeastern region. So that can be another great option. Technical colleges also are pretty robust all across the state. So we do have a number of different technical colleges that offer very specific associate's degrees programs. So for many students who are looking at a two-year technical college, this can be a terminal associate's degree that leads right into that career pathway that they're interested in. But our technical colleges also do have those transfer options available. So this can be a really great way for students to start at a smaller campus, have a little bit potentially of that lower tuition as well to really save on money as they're taking those first level intro classes and general education classes before transferring to that four-year institution. The other group I never want to discredit or not count is going to be out-of-state schools. This is an option, and especially for some very specific programs, this may mean looking at some out-of-state schools, whether it's a private school or a statewide institution system as well. So I would always encourage, if you are looking at all different varieties of schools, whether it's public, out-of-state, or private, to definitely take a look at what that means with a number of factors, including the admissions requirements, as well as especially financially, the tuition and costs as well to attend those institutions. Many of us can be very different, obviously, in our tuition prices, but also in regards to scholarship opportunities as well, and how that can be a little bit different institution to institution. So just something to think about as well as you're going through that college search process. In regards to a prep timeline, of course, this is kind of just a quick timeline that I always like students to start to keep in mind. And again, if we're juniors right now and preparing already for this, you may already be crossing off a lot of this from your to-do list, but just keeping this in mind for senior year as well. Make a college list. Start with some important factors that you are looking for. Are you looking for a small school versus a larger school? Or are you looking for kind of that right size, mid-size institution? How far away do you potentially want to be from home? Do you want to be in a more rural location or urban location and city location? Do you want to potentially have to travel a couple hours to get back and forth from campus? Especially when that comes around to breaks and holiday breaks and what that can mean as well. Take a look at what opportunities can be available for majors and programs. All of us can be a little bit different. I like to use a couple different UW system examples. The first one, of course, is we here at UWM, we have the only accredited architecture school in the state of Wisconsin. So that is very specific to UWM. On the other end, UW-Whitewater is the only school in the UW system that has marine biology, which is a very specific program. In addition to that, there can be also specific majors at graduate levels that are only available at certain schools or institutions. Marquette has the only graduate dental program. Madison has the only veterinary school in the state of Wisconsin. So this is something to start to think about as well in regards to your major and program. If you've always had a school kind of on your dream list or on your wish list, definitely checking out to see if they offer that program or major that you're interested in. Also, with that, of course, keeping in mind that starting at colleges undecided, or if you're still kind of multi-interested, as I like to put it, and you are deciding between a couple different areas of study, that is also okay to start college undecided as well to finalize that. As we are moving ahead into your couple years of high school, again, this being with the caveat of everything is looking a little bit different right now with COVID testing, making sure that if schools moving forward are still looking at standardized testing, how we can prepare for those. I know that right now for us, for fall 2021, we are not requiring for our students who are applying this senior year, the ACT or SAT test scores. But once those test scores become available again, potentially post-COVID, that might be something to keep in mind if schools start to put that back into place in terms of an admissions requirement. Definitely then also start to research with your remaining high school years what either AP classes you could potentially register for, honors classes, advanced classes, possibly even dual enrollments as well. That you can really help to boost that GPA and that curriculum and that rigor within your high school transcript. This is not to say that every one of your classes has to be an AP class or a dual enrollment or an advanced course or IB. This is really to say that if you know that there is a specific area that you are interested in, biology, for example, taking a look at potentially taking that AP bio class, because that can take away some of that college requirements for 3 credit courses and initial intro level courses, so that you don't have to worry about taking that again necessarily the start of your freshman year. So this could be a really good way to get some of those intro level courses out of the way and kind of completed already as you are starting your college career. Other things to keep in mind, especially as some of us are probably moving into our senior year schedule, and the ones that I always want to point out, especially as you are working with your high school counselor and preparing for that. Many schools will only require in the college admissions realm 3 years of math. A 4th year of math, though, is probably something to keep in mind for your senior year. Most of us, to use UW's system as an example again, most of us are still going to require that students are taking some form of math in college, especially at that liberal arts level. So again, I know that many of us in the admissions realm, we do not look past typically Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. But know that especially if you are looking into a major or program that is going to be looking at that math more closely, engineering, for example, you are taking a lot of calculus at college, making sure that you are taking that 4th year of math. And even for those of us, like myself, I was an English major. I am still taking math when I was in college. So even in our College of Letters and Sciences at UWM, for our English majors, as an example, they are still taking college algebra and stats. So that could be something to keep in mind for your senior year schedule. The other one where, again, this is not necessarily a requirement for admissions, but the other one that I always advise students to double check or just to kind of review is going to be that foreign language. Again, foreign language for us at UWM and most of the UW schools is not required for admissions. Madison is actually the only school in the UW system that is looking at 2 years of foreign language and the same foreign language as you are applying for admissions. But we do have some programs at our institution that will require that students either complete that foreign language requirement in high school or they are taking foreign language at the college level. So again, just something to keep in mind as you're prepping potentially a future schedule and as you're potentially especially prepping that senior year schedule, what that can look like. Also make sure as we are going into senior year, and I'll make sure to include this as well a little bit more so as part of that admissions process search, but also start to look at that scholarship search. Many of us, we will have automatic scholarships that students are reviewed for based on academic merit. Some of them can come also for new freshmen specifically from programs and schools as well. So if you are an incoming engineering student, there can be specific engineering scholarships for new freshmen. Our LUBAR School of Business, as an example, will also issue out scholarships. So this is something where as you are kind of narrowing down your list or compiling your college list of all the schools that you are applying for, keeping in mind as well. Internship opportunities can always be a great option. I know that we are all very involved, I'm sure, here at the high school level, but making sure that for especially some very specific programs or potentially competitive programs, seeing if you can find ways to have internships within that field. Volunteer work, I know there's a lot of summer institutes that can be directly related to a major or program. Our, like art institutes will typically do summer institutions where it can be a couple weeks specifically in art programs. Pre-med especially, and a lot of the biological sciences or health sciences and medical fields, they typically will also offer up potentially internship programs, or if there are going to be some institute summer programs as well that students can participate in so that they can get a little bit more knowledge and kind of a knowledge base to that major and program if that's what they're interested in. So that would be also something to keep in mind. Again, this is not to kind of stretch ourselves too thin in terms of adding too much to our plate, but really just keeping that in mind in regards to everything that you can include in an admissions process. Of course, then, as we are going into that timeline, if you are able, again, I know a lot of this has kind of a little bit of a halt to it in regards to COVID-19 and safety, but if you are able to visit college campuses, even if it's a virtual setting or once we are back on campus, this is something that I always tell students and really advise if you are able to travel out to your college campuses. This can be a huge piece to your final college decision, especially once you are physically on that campus and once you are seeing what buildings look like, seeing what the residence halls look like. This can be a huge factor in that decision-making process. It can really lend itself to students kind of having that immediate gut feeling of, I like this campus, or never mind, this is not what I was expecting from this campus as well. So it can really help narrow down those choices. Most of us, I know, especially from many of the schools, I recruit within Milwaukee County and surrounding counties as well. Many of my high schools already have this in place where typically by end of junior year or early senior year in English classes, you are drafting up an essay or a personal statement for colleges as kind of a prep. But many of us at the college level, we post pretty early, I know through either the Common App or the UW system application as well, what our upcoming essay statements are going to be. So that gets updated pretty quickly so that you can have that prep already in place so that you know what you are going to be writing about. So you can start to draft that as well and really kind of take any of that into consideration. Make note, of course, of college deadlines. All of us are different as well. And I also do want to make the distinction of some of these deadlines can look like. We do have in place in the UW system as an example, and most even private institutions in Wisconsin will have priority deadlines, which means that they will still accept applications after that deadline until their class is full. But something else to keep in mind, I know Madison has this in place, is going to be early action deadlines, regular decision deadlines. And then I know that even many private schools, I actually worked with private institutions that have this in place, will have early decision deadlines. There is a distinction between early decision and early action. Typically, early action is the less, I want to say less strict, because you have to have your application in by that deadline. But it does mean that you hear your admissions decision earlier than regular decision. Early decision deadlines that come from private institutions, that typically means if you are accepted ED, that early decision, you have to commit to that institution. So make sure, especially for some of these competitive institutions and for some of these private colleges across the US, make sure that you are really reviewing what all of these deadlines mean and what that entails in terms of when you need to either accept that or if you are accepting that through ED in terms of that admissions seat. That can be a little bit different as well. And I know that many institutions across the US more recently now have started to also add that early action versus regular decision deadline. So make sure that you are just keeping that in mind. Some questions that I always like to post, and I know I've talked a little bit about this already, but when you are on a campus tour or even in a virtual setting like today, if you are definitely asking some questions that pertain to you and what you are looking for out of your college visit. This is something that I always want students to really cater to what they are looking for. If you aren't necessarily interested in athletics, don't worry about asking that. If you are more interested in research, definitely make sure to ask about what that can look like, especially if it pertains to specific majors or programs. This is really, especially for a campus tour, I know that these can be larger groups. This can be a lot of questions being asked of from the admissions office, but this is really your time to ask about your interests and your needs for your college experience, especially if you are spending all 4 years potentially on this future campus. We want to make sure that you are finding out all the information that you will need to be successful. In regards to the college admissions process, to kind of just touch base on a little bit more of this information, obviously moving into that college search process, when you are applying, keeping in mind the required materials, I think the two that will always be applicable are going to be that essay and that high school transcript. Moving forward, I know that many schools are not necessarily requiring letters of recommendation anymore. And there are more and more schools, especially with COVID, who have become test optional or test not required. So definitely make sure to check out what the required materials are going to be, and how, if any, how they are reviewing those application materials. Most of us, I would say, across the US are in a holistic process, which means that we take a look at all aspects of your application. So we will take a look at your extracurriculars, your essay, your high school transcript as well. So we really do take a look at all pieces that are sent to us. These are just kind of to compare college prep requirements and typically then high school graduation requirements. Most of these match up with high school graduation requirements. You're typically meeting those college prep, but always make sure to check. I know that there can be some more competitive programs that may be looking for more than what the entire university could be looking for. For example, at UWM, again, we typically only look for 3 years of math, but I can definitely say that our engineering program would be looking for 4 years of math, especially that pre-calc or calculus. So this is something where definitely don't be afraid to ask us. It may not be readily available on our websites, but we do know that connecting you to certain colleges or schools, these requirements can be a little bit different as well. So we always want students to keep that in mind with those college preparation requirements at the high school level. To go a little bit over our review process as well, and I know I've talked a lot about this. This is really kind of what goes into that holistic review process, and also what can go into a scholarship review process. So it can be a little bit of everything for sure. First and foremost, it will probably always be that high school GPA again, and that high school preparation, especially as we are moving towards more test optional across the US and more test not required. Really taking a look then at what that GPA looks like and what that overall high school transcript can look like as well. Keep in mind that junior year is going to be that last full year of grades that we have, depending on when you apply to college. So always make sure that, especially with that junior year, again, not to put any added pressure to it, but that is our last full year that we can take a look at for grades. Your essay can play a really important piece. This is where we can get a lot of kind of who you are beyond your application, a little bit more about your personality, your character, leadership that can be talked about during an essay, why you're interested in the career pathway that you're interested in, or even a personal narrative that you would like us to know as part of that essay process. So the essay, especially if we are potentially not able to meet in person, admissions advisor to applicant, this can be a really great way for us to learn a little bit more about who you are, why you're potentially applying to the institution that you are as well. Some universities can have very specific fields, which means that they can have additional requirements. So they could be looking at specific subject areas. They could be looking at portfolios or auditions as well. So this can all play a factor into that admissions process. So definitely make sure to check that out. There we go. Perfect. Most of this I know that I've already mentioned kind of with that high school transcripts more specifically as well. So again, if anyone just is taking notes for themselves to kind of keep this in mind in regards to what we can look like at the admissions level. And then lastly, I did want to list out, especially again, as we may be planning ahead, some courses to consider if you are able to, and if they are offered at DSHA in regards to some other either electives or extracurricular courses. This is really, especially when you get into electives at the high school level, this is really where you can start to cater some of your last years of classes senior year to what you want to study. So if you are interested in anything that might be humanities or English based, that AP language or that AP English as well. If you're interested again in that science based or engineering based, that math class, obviously with the sciences, any AP classes I would recommend in addition to what you are taking. So that left me with just a couple of minutes for questions. And I know that folks may be also leaving and headed out to another session, but I will leave my contact information up here and I will make sure, I know we should all have access to the chat. Feel free to post questions to the chat, or if you wanted to, we all should have audio and video access as well. But otherwise, don't be afraid to post any questions. Thank you for attending, and hopefully this was helpful information.